Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hey Marshall, how are you today?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Good.
A bit rainy here in Luxembourg, so it's different from the south of Europe. So it's not too bad, actually. And what about you?
It's good. Actually, we've had an amazing summer, sunshine every day, except for yesterday we got our first rain, which at this point we need it. But the Seattle area during the summertime is one of the most beautiful places that I know. It's we got lots of trees, lots of water, and when the sun is out, it's great. So right now it's been pretty nice. Hey, you split your time between Brussels and Luxembourg?
No, I mean, it's essentially Luxembourg.
Okay. I thought you commute though or something, right?
Well, yeah, because I live in Belgium. So I live at 60 kilometers from the office. So yeah, I commute every day.
And I know people who live in France who commute to Luxembourg, and that's such a different paradigm for us Americans, because when you talk about going to another country, it's far.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit different here.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think you're really blessed in that manner. Hey, I want to talk to you about some of the nuances related to financial translation, and specifically some of the requirements in the EU that banks and different types of asset management companies, for example, have to fulfill in order to sell their products in Europe. But before we do that, could you just give a short introduction to yourself and to Talk Finance?
Yeah, sure. So basically by training, I'm a translator. So this is what I studied at university. But then I ended up, by luck or by chance, call it the way you want, in the asset management industry. That was in the mid-90s. And I worked at a company called JP Morgan, Jardine Fleming, which was an Asian branch of a company called Fleming's, which was then bought up by Chase Manhattan just before they merged with JP Morgan. So that was my first experience in finance. And then I moved to another company called Schroders, which is an English asset manager. And there I worked in the institutional sales support. So I headed a department that basically set up a whole series of specific reports on funds. So that was all about performance, on market comments, and a lot of tailor-made reports where we analyzed the fund performances from different angles. For instance, an investment, a pension fund, they are not necessarily going to put the priority on the highest performance, but they want the most regular, or by that I mean the less chaotic performance.
Right.
So
they want to minimize risk and just go for that, so those kind of consistent returns.
Yes, exactly. So for some clients, performance was the most important. For the clients, it was more the volatility of performances. Then you had, as I said, a whole array of reports. And actually, this is where the idea of setting up Talk Finance came to my mind, because my colleagues from marketing and legal were always complaining about the quality of translations. And I thought, after all, this is what I studied. and I knew this.
You know a translator? Oh, yeah, I do.
and I knew this business very well. So I decided to jump to do the big jump and start this business. So I started it all alone, but because I had a lot of colleagues from different nationalities in the asset management business, I could start with a team of freelancers that my colleagues helped me select. So, for instance, a German colleague would tell me, okay, this German translator is really good, this one isn't. So this is how it all started. And then I gradually started to hire people, translators. And I forgot to mention that the company, I set it up in 2002. So that's a bit more than 20 years now. And over time, I built this team. And then I had a partner who came on board. And today we are a bit more than 30 people in-house, plus a team of, we have more than 500 freelancers, but I would say that we work on a daily basis with 50, 60 out of these.
Still, that's impressive. I like this story because it's kind of the classic business story in terms of you identified a problem, but you also had the solution. You had some support and you kind of transitioned into it. And I think, if I recall correctly, that did you work kind of hybrid mode for a while, or did you go 100% for your own business?
No, I actually worked for 6 months part-time at Schroders still, while I started to set up and develop the business.
Yeah. And that's kind of nice to have that little bit of a transition period there. I wanted to clarify something too, because, again, for outsiders looking in, banking is just one big blob of bankers. And most people like me think of banking as their little consumer bank down in the corner. But that is not the, probably the primary driver or provider for the for translation requirements, right?
No.
And you mentioned, I think you said asset management, institutional, and even there you have institutional sales, and then you also have consumer sales, right? And there are difference in requirements in terms of what gets translated, how it gets translated, everything like that.
Yeah.
Before we dive into these areas, maybe you could just touch on some of the areas that you see are requiring the most amount of translation, and then we'll get into the specific areas that related to the E requirements.
Yeah. So basically, asset management, and by this I mean investment funds or mutual funds, as you call them in the US, are by far the biggest consumer of translations in the financial sector. Why is that? Simply because in the European Union, you can actually set up a fund in one of the EU member countries, like Luxembourg, for instance, is the biggest country in terms of fund domicile. And then you can market it very easily in all the other EU member states. So the administration burden is very low. So it really encourages asset managers to set up funds within the EU and market them all over Europe. And of course, if you want to market them in Italy or in France or in Spain, for instance, it's better to have all your documents and marketing content in these languages. So some documents are compulsory. So, for instance, there is one type of document which is called a KIID, which is Key Investor Information Document. This is compulsory to have it translated into the host country language. Other documents are not compulsory. So I'm thinking of, for instance, what we call a fund prospectus. So basically, this is the user's manual of an investment fund. It can be pretty thick. So some of them are like 500 pages.
Wow.
And you don't have to have them translated. So then it comes down to a marketing decision. You want to address your audience exclusively in their own language, or are you happy to provide some documents in your own language, i.e. essentially in English? And actually, it was quite interesting to see that at some point, the EU regulators decided to have a new type of document issued, which was called the simplified prospectus, because for the reason that I just mentioned, some prospectuses were like 500 pages, and they thought that investors would be just drawn into so much information. So they said, okay, we need to make it more digestible, and they decided to have asset managers produce this document, and this one had to be translated in each country's language. But then they removed the obligation to translate the full prospectus into these languages. So as a translation company specialized in finance, we thought, oh, this is going to have a big impact because huge documents like prospectuses won't need to be translated anymore. And we thought that most clients would not translate them anymore. But in the end, this didn't happen. So they continued, with a few exceptions, of course, but they continued to have these translated, plus the simplified prospectuses. So eventually we had more work than less work, which was quite good for us. And then it's not a surprise if I tell you that this is a sector, an industry that is in constant evolution, and the regulation too. So then the EU regulator came with this document I mentioned earlier, the KIID, Key Investor Information Document. So this, the aim was to replace the simplified prospectus. And this is a very normalized document. So it's 3 pages for...
I like that. Yeah. For me, I would read the 3-pager, not the 500-pager.
Yeah, indeed. And then there's a new regulation which came out last year, at the end of last year, earlier last year, but all the funds had to comply with it by the 31st of December. That's what we call, that's a regulation called Sustainable Finance, basically for funds. It's called SFDR. And the funds basically have to publish information on their sustainability impact. So it can be from essentially ESG, so environmental, social, and governance impact. But this created huge amount of documents that had to be translated. So to give you an idea, December last year, our turnover was almost 4 times the usual turnover for this time of the year. So that was the original documents that they had to compile and have translated. But then once this step has been done, they also had to translate on a regular basis some kind of reporting documents. So even though the big chunk of the translations was at the end of last year / beginning of this year, the impact is going to be for a longer time, because every quarter or every other quarter, they still have to produce some reporting documents. So all these regulations really feed our business, I would say, because our clients always have new translation needs.
So let me back up a little bit. When you say they, in terms of the regulators, who exactly are they?
The EU regulators.
Okay. And is there a special subcommittee for financial products or?
I would assume so. I must say I never asked myself this question, but they must have.
And then, well, I mean, I'm just going to ask, how do you keep abreast or aware of the latest EU regulations or proposed regulations? Is there a mechanism for you to be updated or?
Yeah, there are some specialized websites and also the EU website where you can download all the regulations. So these regulations, each time there is a new regulation that comes out, they also publish the official translations. Now, sometimes you see that it hasn't been translated by someone who's familiar with the concepts and the financial sector. For instance, an investment fund is actually divided in a number of what we usually call sub-funds. In French, you call this compartiment. And we saw that in the original regulation, they had actually translated, or they had used the word compartment in English, which no one in the investment fund industry would ever use. So
I've never heard of a compartment fund.
Wondered where they got this from. So I could only come up to the conclusion that they just kind of copied this from the French, the French terminology.
Yeah,
I don't know, but this is quite strange. So sometimes they have some strange terms that they use.
Well, you bring up a good point. Again, it goes back to that whole thing of if you're not a subject matter expert and you just think that finance is all one big blob or banking is one blob.
No.
And I think about a challenge that you had where, you had your volume increase. I think you said fourfold recently. So when that happens, obviously you need to find qualified linguists, right? And maybe you can talk a little bit about the importance of very specific subject matter expertise, and then also explain how do you vet new linguists to make sure that they are what they say they are, because some people say they're everything. Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Some people have a strange conception of specialization. When you see on the CV under specialization, you have 20 different fields. This always makes me laugh. So basically, of course, the ideal profile for us is someone who's familiar or / exclusively specialized in finance and has good writing skills. But these people are very rare.
Let me just interject there. I hired 3 equity research translators in Japan.
Yes.
And it was incredibly difficult to find qualified people. And if you could find them, their rates were sky high. And we wanted to hire these people in-house because we had regular recurring reports that actually we had to start the work process at like 4 a.m. So we needed to stagger when they would work. And the 3 hires that we made, and it was probably 3 of the best hires I ever made in Japan, were retired financial journalists. They had the subject matter expertise, but they also had, what you just said, the ability to write well, right? In an appropriate manner. Please continue.
Yeah. So basically, for me, this is the most important aspect. So if I can't find my dream translator, I would definitely choose someone who's got very good style, versus someone who's familiar with finance but doesn't have good writing skills. Because I learned myself by experience that style, you have it or you don't. It's quite, I can't explain it, but just some people don't have the right connections in their brain to write with a good style. I've tried with some people who I hired and who were familiar with the investment funds. I thought, okay, I wasn't convinced by the style, but I thought, okay, very naively, I thought, okay, we'll work this out. But I realized that it just doesn't work.
It's easier to teach the terminology than it is to teach the actual writing skills.
Yeah.
On the sales side, I've trained a lot of salespeople, and what I've found is, there are some things that people can learn, like product knowledge, market knowledge, things like that. But the basic communication skills are things that people pick up over their whole life. And it's very tough to sit down in a workshop and change that. And it's people find it painful too. If you tell somebody that they're writing, they need to change their style, it's very personal.
Yeah, and actually the problem is because these people don't know, they don't realize that their writing skills are not good. So you can only change or improve something you know.
You recognize there's a problem.
Yeah. So I can recall of a translator who used to invent expressions in French. So I was telling her, but look, if you type this expression in Google, it just doesn't exist. You won't have any occurrences. So all the words taken individually were fine, but you couldn't just put them together. It didn't work. So that was quite frustrating for me, to be honest. I spent hours and hours reviewing and improving these translations.
So now when you talk to a new linguist, you obviously look at their CV, but then do you have some type of test evaluation process?
Yeah. So we have tests that are actually not that complicated to understand in terms of finance, but which are quite tricky to render in terms of style. And this is really where we assess the translators. And I train them myself in finance. So you mentioned terminology. Terminology is only one aspect. Understanding the concepts behind the words is also very important, of course. So as far as I'm concerned, I have a training program that covers equities, bonds, derivatives, and investment funds. But actually, investment funds are a mixture of the first three, because they invest in all these instruments. So once my newcomers have gone through this training, they're able to translate between 80 and 85% of our documents. And then you have pure banking content, which is again different from investment fund. Then we also have insurance content, a little bit of real estate, and that's about it. Yeah.
Well, let me jump in for a second, because banks also have a tremendous amount of content. For example, learning and development content for internal communications, and then there's PR, there's marketing.
Yeah.
Learning and development can be huge because they may be teaching their dealers or their brokers or their sales people about how to sell different things, or they may have anti-money laundering training or compliance training or anything like that has to go out everywhere in the world where they have an office, and that could be 50 different countries. Is that something you're involved with? Are you more always pretty much focused on that financial content related to asset management?
Yeah, we do translate this kind of stuff for some banks who actually work exclusively with us. So sometimes, as you rightly pointed out, it can just be an internal memo or an AML document, or it can even be the user's manual of a new program. So it's purely IT. So we also have this type of profiles where when we need them, basically.
Well, and I know from our previous discussion that one of the biggest challenges for translating some of the content, so for example, the SFDRs, is obviously you need to find the qualified linguists, but that's just part of the puzzle, right? You also need to deal with these kind of cumbersome templates that are required. Can you kind of walk us through the challenge of working with that template? And then, I mean, I think you developed a quite unique solution, so maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, actually, SFDR is a very good example. It's probably the best example to develop upon. Basically, the EU regulators, once again, they came up with this new requirement for the investment.
It's funny.
funds.
Nobody ever smiles when they say regulators. They are regulators.
Well, actually, as I said, they bring us, they create a lot of.
Yes, for you, it's quite good. There you go. There's a smile.
So I love them.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't love them, and our clients certainly don't love them in terms of templates, because
Okay.
If our audience want to have an idea of the templates that are required, they can just type SFDR EU regulation templates, and they will see. So basically, these templates are really complex because they use symbols, images. They have I don't know how you say this in English, but text in the left margins that are really close to the border of the sheets. And basically, to do this, you have to use a lot of text boxes and things like that. So that's one thing. And you have to have responsive documents, because, as you know, French, for instance, or Spanish or Italian is longer than English. So if your template is perfect in English, it might just go all over the place in other languages, because the text will, you won't see the entire text in the text box, or if the text box adapts, it might run over the next page, and it can be a real nightmare. So we have experienced this with these templates. And I think the biggest problem is that most clients have kind of lost the control of their content, because they use service providers who actually use content management tools. So basically, the client will actually feed the tool with the original content, and then the tool will produce the PDF. So there isn't in between a step where you have an editable document like Word or even simple TXT files. So the clients receive PDFs. So they send us PDFs. So then first thing we have to do is actually convert these PDFs into editable format. But then here again, the results are really bad, because there isn't one tool on the market that gives perfect results. So here again, it might look fine in English, but as soon as you start to touch it and translate, and then the translations are longer, it goes all over the place. So we end up in a situation where the DTP costs are higher than the translation costs themselves. So this is nonsense. So we've tried to really tackle this issue, and we actually tested the basic Word and Excel documents. I mean, Word for the format and Excel for the template, for the content, sorry, that you can actually link to the Word templates. And there are responsive. If you set up your Word templates correctly, because I'm sorry, but in the end, Word is the editing tool. I mean, it's got so many functionalities that are really good and that you can that you can use. Actually, very few people know how to use Word thoroughly. That's also a problem, but we do. I'm not saying that we know all the functionalities, but we know a lot of them, and we know how to produce a very good and responsive template. And then you can actually link this template to an Excel file where you actually put your content. And when you open the Word file, the content will automatically update. So that's a solution. Okay, now I'm not saying this is a solution for asset managers who have thousands of documents to produce. But then they should really work with the document content management tool providers to maybe find a better way to work. Because as I said, when you only get PDFs, in the end, you might just have like 10 words to translate, and then you spend 2 hours or 3 hours per document to make them well formatted. Here again, it's just nonsense. I did this exercise with a number of clients. After the first batch of translations, we looked at what was the proportion of costs that had to do with DTP compared to translation. It was almost 70%. Almost 70% of the costs were DTP.
That's crazy.
Yes.
That's nuts. And I mean, I was really impressed. And unfortunately, I mean, we tried to do a screen share and show that, but I got to watch it, even though the recording didn't work. But I was super impressed with the ability of your template to kind of work in that responsive mode. And I think that, you know, you were able to reduce the DTP costs significantly, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, with the templates, basically you just we would translate the content. Okay, basically you have to make the distinction between I'll call it fixed content. That is the content that doesn't change from one template to another or from one reporting period to another. So that kind of template, you can fix it in the, not fix, but I'm sure you see what I mean.
Yeah, you can make it kind of permanent.
Yes,
and so it
permanent.
doesn't, yeah. Okay.
In the translation template, and then you only work in the content that has to be translated and that is handled separately in Excel. And then that's it. Because once you have done this, you just open the Word file, it updates automatically. The length of the text is, as I said, the file is responsive, so it adapts automatically. You just have to check quickly that it's all fine. You save it, and that's it. So the DTP costs are almost zero.
Yeah. And you know, another benefit that I'm thinking, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this or right, but, is every time that there's a back and forth between people and systems, there's an opportunity to introduce errors, whether you break the template or somebody corrects something, but they missed something. And then the proofreader has to check it again. And the more back and forth, the more opportunities for a quality issue. So if you kind of eliminate that and make the process easier, smoother, I would think that you would get better quality outcomes.
Yeah, sure. That's obvious.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And this also makes me think that clients, or some clients, they don't really understand the benefits of translation tools, or at least not fully. Because when you mention changes back and forth, it happens quite often that some clients say, okay, here we only have an update of prospectus or KIID or an SFDR document. Can you just replicate the changes in the target languages in the translations? And that's it. So of course it costs less money because we don't reprocess the entire content in the translation tools. But what they don't think about is that if you do this, all these changes won't be the translation memories. So next time these documents are updated, the tool
they'll have to make those changes again. They'll say, hey, make these changes.
Yes, exactly.
They become the translation memory.
Yes. So it's always a bit challenging to have them understand that they should pay a little bit more for full use of CAD tools. So, they always, I understand that their translation budget can be really big, but it's way better to try and optimize these costs working on the DTP issues than trying to save a few cents here and there by not processing everything in the translation memory.
Well, and then long term, they will get those savings back in the translation memory. I mean, that's just,
Yeah, of course.
You put the content in, you might not get the savings today, but you'll get it eventually.
Yeah, and also what is important, and this is something I always tell them as well. I say, okay, you don't want to process this in the translation memory. Okay, fair enough. But if you have other documents where the same sentence appears and you send them to us for translation, they won't be consistent with these track change documents because it won't be in the translation memory. So you also have to think across the board. I mean, there are a lot of documents that are linked and that have the same content. So, for instance, the investment objective of a fund, you will find this in the prospectus. You will find this in the KIID. You will also probably find this in some marketing documents, and it should be consistent from one document to another. So it's important to have up-to-date translation memories.
Absolutely. Well, now that we're on the subject of technology, maybe you can talk a little bit about the use of different technologies, tools, including machine translation, and if you're seeing any, LLMs or ChatGPT derivatives being used or being asked about by your customers.
Yeah. Actually, it's okay. Customers don't necessarily ask for machine translation, but they think that because machine translation exists, we only have to press a button and that's it. So costs should be reduced. So that's more in this respect that they are interested in machine translation. So we really have to explain to them what are the pros and the cons of machine translation. So basically, for standardized content like KIIDs or prospectuses or even SFDR documents, machine translation can be helpful. It's not like human translation, so that's really important to tell the clients what they have to expect. So post-edition will produce correct documents, but very literal ones compared to a full human translation. But if they are happy with this, fine. I mean, the most important is really to manage client expectations. So tell them the differences, then they choose. And sometimes it would be good for them to just post-edit the content themselves so that they understand how much work this still requires.
Actually, that's a really good idea. Yeah, because I get it where they're like, hey, just use machine translation. You're like, okay, but you do the post editing.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when you get the output from the machine, you say, hey, it's good. But then when you start to really post edit it, you realize that, okay, it's not that good actually. I should change this and this and that. So it really depends on the content. Now, if you're talking about marketing content and high visibility sales brochures, things like that, I think you can forget it. Maybe some sentences that are produced by the machine will be helpful. You can use them and post edit them, but most of the time it's really too literal. And talking about ChatGPT, for instance, I tested it myself to see what comes out of it. It's okay, but it's not any better than the likes of DeepL or other tools. And so far, it's not easy to use, because basically you have to tell ChatGPT, can you translate this? And then it does, and then you have to cut and paste the translation into the target document. So at this stage, I wouldn't use it at all. But I'm sure they will come up with a genuine translation tool.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's just simply API connections to whatever tool you're using, and you'll be able to do the queries or commands. But that's a couple iterations down, and also I think it's really heavily dependent upon which language pairs now.
Yeah, of course. I didn't mention this, but obviously, yeah.
So let me ask you this, because you're a language service provider, and if I was selling MT, I target directly to the customer, but I also sell to LSPs, right? Because I want them to use, they would need to use an MT tool oftentimes. How do you evaluate, like if you're going to use a machine translation platform, how do you evaluate it and let them in the door to even give them a trial? I mean, what are the first questions? And then what's the process down the road to actually determine, hey, I want to work with these people?
For me, first things, of course, you have to see the output, whether it's usable or not, whether it's good. But equally, not to say more importantly, we have to make sure that the content that we would put in this tool is in a closed circuit?
Closed loop.
Closed loop, yeah. That it doesn't go
for security?
out.
For security.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we are in a field, finance, where confidentiality is very important. So
you don't want to put it on Google Translate online because, hey,
we would never do that. We use DeepL, but it's basically it's here again in closed loop. So it means that we don't benefit from the latest developments in terms of output improvement, because to do so you have to accept that your content goes on the net. So we don't do this. But we also use another tool from a company that actually develops machine translation engines based on our own translation memories, or on our clients' translation memories. So this is just specific to us.
Excellent. Well, you touched on security. What other requirements do you kind of put in place for security?
Some clients don't want to send documents per email, so we have SFTP. How do you call this? Links or pages or whatever. I'm not an expert, but I know we propose this, and we also use Plunet with a client interface where clients can upload and download documents directly in Plunet. So this we are covered. I mean, where clients want high security, we can certainly offer.
Are they asking for any requirements like ISO or anything like that?
I think over the past 21 years, I've had maybe 5 clients asking for this or add this in an RFP. We never requested any ISO certification, to be honest. I think our reputation speaks for us. First, we have very, very good level of service, and ISO in no way is a guarantee of good translations. ISO is only for service and how you actually, they just validate your processes, but they can't validate the quality of the translations, which ultimately for me is the most important.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this to kind of wrap things up. If you have aspiring financial linguists or other people that are interested in this space and they want to keep abreast of the latest developments, what are the websites, industry associations, or events that they should be looking at?
Well, first of all, as I said, in terms of regulation, it's the EU website. So you just type EU regulation and it's called EURLEX. So EURLEX. So there you have all the EU regulation, and then you have in each country you have specific associations. So there are, if you type, for instance, investment funds associations, you'll find them in each country. And usually, let's say I'm French, I want to find out which association it is. So I find it. And then if you go into the menu and you look at links, you will probably find links to other countries' associations. So it really takes a few minutes of research to find the associations in each country. And talking about France, for instance, it's a really good one because they have a lot of tutorials where you can find the right terminology. It's really a gold mine. They have a lot of good documents and reliable, of course, because that's always the danger with internet. You have so many different sources. Some of them are not reliable at all, but they look reliable, but they aren't. The most important is really to always find and trust native language sources. So I would never look for French terminology on I don't know even if this exists, but Financial Times French translations, for instance. You see, I would only trust the native sources for sure.
Excellent. And then, are there any particular events that you definitely attend every year?
There is this. It's not specific to finance, but I quite like to attend them. It's a European Language Industry Association, so ILIA. They have very good and informative seminars. There are also some seminars from the Syndicat Français des Traducteurs, Société Française des Traducteurs. So this is they have specific seminars for financial translators. So this is usually pretty good. Actually, you won't attend these seminars to learn about. It's not financial training, but the subject matters are usually quite interesting, and it's also nice to gather and get to know each other. These are, and then you can attend the specific financial seminars. So, for instance, here in Luxembourg, you have the Investment Fund Association that organizes probably 2, 3, 4 seminars every year. They also organize roadshows for in Germany, in Asia, a little bit everywhere, where we could attend if we want. So the good thing is that you meet people from the industry there. The bad thing is that there are so many people that the probability that you that you step into someone who's got translation needs is very low. But when you start to know people, then it's a good event to attend.
Awesome. That's some great advice. Okay, last question. So I stayed up last night and struggled through a 15-page paper written by a colleague at memoQ on some of the very relevant aspects and developments in AI and large language models. So I learned about transformers and nodes and a bunch of other things. And I don't know how I'm going to use it myself, but I understand it's getting to be very exciting for the industry. From where you sit, what are you most excited about for your company and the industry or technologies over the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, it's really looking at the evolution of AI and its its uses. I must say that 5 years ago, I would never have believed that it could reach such a level of output. So
because we've had years and years and years of kind of unfulfilled promises. It's going to get there. It's going to be
exactly.
there.
I remember when I left university, so that was in 1990. One of my schoolmates, university mate, was hired by a company that was actually busy developing these tools, and for the EU. But it was just prehistory. I mean, the output was just amazingly bad. And then you surely know it. It was called Systran. They still exist. But I think they were the first. They were probably the first. But as I said, this dates back more than 30 years ago. And now when you see how this has evolved, it's amazing. And that's definitely since AI took over. Because before this, I think it was a little bit struggling. So now I wouldn't say, I don't know whether I'm more excited than scared. Who knows what AI is going
that's a challenge.
Be able to produce in the future? Are we all going to lose our jobs? I don't know. I still think that good translators have some future, but bad, or let's say average to bad translators, I think they should really be scared, because and there are so many. There are so many, unfortunately. I personally think that there are only 10% of good translators on the market. People who can really write.
I tell you, when I was at CLS Communication, I managed Asia for them. And, it was my first role in the localization industry. Actually, I had a lot of regional experience in Asia, but in the B2B media space, came into translation, and it was something new. I had to learn it. And one of the things that I learned real quick, because a lot of times you get asked about price, we were kind of fortunate because we were in a unique space, finance. Yeah. Okay. And so security, quality became a priority, or was a priority. But what I learned very, very quickly is you got to get the good linguists, man, because if you don't, it's just such a stressful experience. You send it out and you don't know what you're going to get back, and you have to redo it, and your client's waiting, your customer's waiting, right? And I mean, I can remember a couple jobs that blew up on us because we used untrusted linguists, and the results came back less than ideal. And I can still remember getting yelled at by customers, and it's, it's a terrible thing. So but it's really hard to find those people. And when you find them, we would make them actually the cornerstone of a part of our business, where you would have a head linguist that you could trust. And then that linguist would vet any new linguist and train them.
Totally. I agree 200%. It's a star system. Once you have, you remember when I said how it all started for Talk Finance, I had my colleagues from different nationalities help me select the right translators. And then I actually could even build in-house teams based on these translators' feedback, because business was really growing. So I told them, look, I will definitely continue to work with you, but can you help me select good in-house translators? And once you have the good in-house translators, you can build your in-house teams around these, and also extend your freelancers or your freelance pool with these people. It's so important to have these stars, these few. And for some languages, it really took me a while. But now I prefer by far to wait 2 or 3 years until I found the right guy or the right girl, than hiring just because I need to hire. Because in the end, it never works.
No, I mean, it's so tempting too. A customer comes to you and says, hey, I've got this project and it's got to go into, for example, Thai, and you don't do Thai, but you're like, I don't want to say no to this project. I don't want to say no to it. Right. And it's a big thing and it's going to be recurring. And if you take it too early, like you said, it can blow up, and it's better to wait and be patient. But it's hard though, when you're running a business, especially in the early years.
But I would, what I would do in this case, I wouldn't say no. I would say, look, we don't have Thai translators, but I can test some for you. So if you have a 50-page document, I can send, you tell me maybe a short excerpt of this, maybe one page and a half. Tell me, okay. And then I can try and test 5 or 6 translators on this.
And you choose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I'm transparent with the client, and I think they appreciate the fact that you try to help them. And if 1 or 2 of these translators come out as producing good quality, then we can also use them in the future.
Absolutely. That's an awesome approach. I haven't thought about it that way. What we've done though is actually Thai is a real life example. We had no trusted linguists. We're based in Singapore. You'd think we would, but we just didn't get a lot of demand for Thai languages. Then all of a sudden we did, and we found one star. It took us a while. We found that star, and that star built a whole virtual team for us. Yeah. And it took time, but it was a great experience, a great approach.
That's the only way you can build your teams. I mean, what I always tell clients is, when you buy a car, you know directly whether it works or not. But if you have to hire a German translator and you don't speak German, how can you know?
How can you know? Yeah. Right? It looks okay to me. Hey, Marshall, really enjoyed this conversation as usual. Thank you so much for being on memoQ Talks, and I look forward to meeting you one day in person.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.